Hey everybody, this is Tim. Before we get started with the interview about Gran Turismo, I wanted to remind you all that we are still in the window for listener submissions for our upcoming crowdsource Favorite Field Recording Stories episode. You have until November 19th, 2023 to dig up a recording you have made that you really love and tell us the story behind it. You can go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click on Field Recording Story Submissions at the top of the main page to find out all the details on how to submit. The sound you are hearing right now is one of the sounds that has already been sent our way, and the tale behind how it was created is really kind of mind-blowing. So if you have a funny, beautiful, personally meaningful, or special in any way recording, please send it our way. Okay, let's get on to the episode. Hello and welcome to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. My name is Tim Muirhead and I will be your host today. I'm sitting in Stage A at 424 Post in Hollywood with some of the sound crew from the recent Neill Blomkamp film, Gran Turismo, based on a true story. This film, which is available now on digital and will be out on 4K Blu-ray and DVD on November 7th, poses a massive challenge for the sound team, as our main character goes from racing in games to real cars, all the way up the ladder to Le Mans. Many different types of cars are raced, and the sound design for each race is unique and super exciting. With us today, we have the film's co-supervising sound editors, Erin Oakley and Kami Asgar. It's great to welcome you both to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
We also have one of the film's re-recording mixers, Beau Borders. I'm happy to meet you, Beau. On this film, you were on the faders for SFX while Kevin O'Connell handled the dialogue and music. Is that correct?
That is all true.
Excellent. So the director of this film, Neill Blomkamp, rose to prominence when he directed the film District 9.
Yes.
That film is known for its sound. It has one of the most amazing soundtracks that I've ever heard. So I'm guessing that for him, he puts a lot of importance on the sound of a film.
Yes, absolutely.
Correct.
How does he convey that to you? What were the expectations put on you when you started on the film? Beau?
Right out of the gate, he's so enthusiastic. He's so into it. I have some friends in New Zealand that actually did the sound design for District 9, so I called them, and all they just conveyed to me was just anger and jealousy that they didn't get to work for him again because he's such a cool, collaborative guy. But yeah, he's a big car guy. I'm a big car guy, but we come at it from different kind of points of view. He likes to see the cars. He knows the stats of the cars. He's into the beauty of the cars. I don't care about any of that. I just want to drive them. So that kind of helped for my contribution of the movie for sure. But yeah, he just right out of the gate, he was really, really enthusiastic.
Yeah. And one of the big things was when I saw that Neill's directing this movie, Gran Turismo, we all played the video game growing up. None of us really had any idea what the movie was going to be about. It's got Neill, it's cars. Yes, we want to do it. And, it's like, hey, we want Beau because he's a race car driver. Immediately is like, yes, that's the way I wanted to go. Kevin is a huge car nut. Mm-hmm. Erin is a huge motorsport car nut and motorcycles and all that. And I used to manage an off-road racing team, and it's my little passion since I was a kid to be involved with cars, and so it just all seemed to fall into place. And we sit and meet with Neill, and Neill's a huge car nut, and
huge.
We sat and talked the first time I think we sat together after watching the movie. We barely talked about sound; we just talked about cars.
We just talked about cars.
Different cars, what's in the movie. Oh man, it's, that AMG that's in there. Like, oh, I love that car, and we just talked cars. And we walked away, like knowing that we're all on board. We're going to do the best job possible to put it on the screen.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I didn't even know if I officially had the job yet. Like Kami said, John Navarro kind of put together this car enthusiast team that he thought would bring something to the table. I had a long relationship with Colby Parker, the picture editor. They said, well, here's the script, read it, and then come on in, check out the movie, and then meet Neill. I had just competed in a touring car race up in Northern California, so it was kind of fresh on the brain. And the thing that struck me about the script we as a team, 424 Post and Kevin and I, we actually already just did a video game. Video game movie. We did Uncharted. That movie never acknowledges that it's in the world of a video game. You know, that's just a standalone movie. Gran Turismo had this whole different arc to it where you really acknowledge the existence of the video game and you tell this true story about, you know, somebody competing on a very high level and then, you know, you end up graduating into real cars. I race with guys that went to GT Academy and Jan beat them and that's why he got to go racing and they didn't. It was already pretty close to home, and then when I watched the movie, the rough cut of the movie, I realized that the point of view of the movie is very much in the driver's head. All throughout, even in the video game part of it, all throughout every level of racing that Jan does, you know, you're always like really in the cockpit with the car, with the driver. And so when I met Neill, I just blurted out this thing where I said, you know, this funny thing always happens where, you know, while I'm behind the wheel of a race car, whether it's
I'm just going to stop you for a sec. For people who don't know, like you literally race cars. You're not talking about
I mean,
driving on the Sunday
he's a
afternoon.
professional racer.
Beau's a professional racer.
I've been training for this film for a long time.
And you got the part.
Yeah, my father always raced cars growing up. I've been driving race cars since I was, I think, 21 or 22. It's the number one thing that I do outside of doing, you know, sound for movies. I'm at the racetrack quite a lot. And I race, you know, I'm kind of like the level of like a minor league baseball player in the world of racing. So not to go on and on about it, but just for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to give some context.
Google me
sorry
and
for
you'll see.
interrupting.
Yeah, we do lots of car racing, and it's on a very similar level of what Jan does in this film. So it's a thing that I'm really excited about, and I always try to keep my mouth shut on Monday morning, especially if I've been racing all weekend, because, you know, unless I'm working with Kami, nobody really wants to talk about it. But it's been that thing.
And I want to watch the videos. It's like, dude, that's awesome.
Kami and I have been bonding. We bonded over car racing like 20 years ago.
You have videos of almost all your races, don't you? Video every race, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we get to watch them down.
And to Erin's point, you know, when I'm behind the wheel, I'm convinced that the thing that I'm going through is so exciting and so overwhelming and so wild, and I can hear every rattle and I can hear the wind whistling through the car. I can hear the other car, and when they pick up a gear and like, oh, he upshifted a little bit sooner than me, where's he at the power band? I can hear them lifting off the throttle, and so that I know to hit the brakes a tiny bit later, and maybe I won't crash, maybe I will. And then, you know, later, and I'm so convinced that because I'm recording this, I know that this footage is incredible. And then the car race is over and the adrenaline wears off and the footage is never as incredible. You know, it's never as exciting. It doesn't sound as cool. It doesn't look as cool. It's not as wild as what was going on in my brain. So my pitch to Neill was, I want to work with 424 Post and Kevin O'Connell and, you know, Gary Hecker, the Foley guy. I want to work with everybody, and I want to create the thing that was in my head and not the thing that was on my little video camera after the race. And he was just like, that's disgustingly awesome, which is a thing that he likes to say a lot.
Yes.
And he just really gave us all full reign. So we were able to collaborate with Charles Deenan at Source Sound, who, you know, for those in the audio world, he's the go-to guy for cars, and you know, their team really delivered on car recordings. That was really, they gave us such great stuff to work with. It's been so fun.
That goes back to John Navarro, who's a huge car nut himself too. The rest of the studio isn't. You know, they're filmmakers and studio execs and stuff, and you know, they budgeted this movie a certain way, like any other kind of an action film. There was barely any recording budget for cars. And this stuff doesn't, you know, the things that we hear in our head and how it should sound just does not exist in any libraries. So, you know, bringing on Charles, I'm like, oh, well, Charles has got a huge library. That's all he does is cars. And, you know, first phone call, Charles calls up, hey, so about the cars, we don't have any of these cars. If you want it to sound real, we have to go out and record all this stuff. We nickel and dimed our way in, just little by little, just kept pushing John, like, hey, John Navarro at Sony, hey, we need to record this car, we need to record that car. That was a giant expense that they had to swallow, and they ultimately gave us the money to go out and find race cars. It's not easy, I can tell you that. I mean, it took us a lot of string pulling and calling people and getting Nissan involved and getting race car drivers out there to give us active race cars during the season at a airport in England, in the desert out here, and in Palm Springs and whatever, wherever we can just get people to go. Because you can't really record it at racetracks. There's too much sound going on. We need to get the sounds we need to get for these cars to get that visceral sound from that actual race car. That Nissan has a specific sound. I remember the first time I jumped in a race car, and I'm sure you felt the same way too, being a gearhead and all that. We fixed up cars, and then you're sitting in a professional race car, and you click that motor on, and that thing comes to life. It's insanity. You feel the raw power of this thing, and that's the thing I want people to understand, that it's not just, it's some regular street thing. It has balls. It really moves you and has total visceral effect on you, and we need to capture that. And Charles Denon's crew is insane. They're insane. They're the magicians of the stuff. They know exactly where to put all the mics and how to do it, and and they have a day with this race car on an airfield. There's actually a plane crashed while we were trying to record a car, and we had to stop recording because of some plane crashed. The guy lost his nose wheel, and we lost a half a day because of that, because the fire trucks show up, and we're like standing on the sidelines, costing money. Every minute is costing, because there's a race car that we're paying for, the gas, the tires, the crew, the driver. It's a big production, and they have to truck this stuff in. It can't come back the next day. But those guys got exactly what we needed, because anytime me and Beau are sitting there, and Beau goes, it'd be really cool here is if we actually did a downshift rather than an upshift. We had that stuff. They had recorded everything that we wanted, and if something that they cut that we wanted to change, all we had to do is just pull it out a little bit and move it and go, it's all there. We didn't have to, go, we'll just have to go with the best possible. Everything was done amazingly well by Charles, and the Sound Source crew are geniuses.
To go back to what Beau was saying about talking to Neill and bringing the realism, because when he'd watch his videos back, they were very flat, and he wanted to bring the life to everything. The one good thing that he did bring it, which was awesome, was that he gave us his recordings, and we would hear this guy talking in his ear. And Colby fell in love with it. And so we started using his recordings and putting that in. And then Neill fell in love because Neill loved all the squawks, and he loved everything. You didn't need to hear exactly what was being said, because even like Beau said, you don't really clearly hear, right, what the guys are saying. You can, but you're
in your helmet.
There's so much going on. But as an audience member, you're not going to really hear, and Neill didn't care what they were saying. But because of what he did, we were able to hire a real spotter, and he came in for the loop group, and we had 2 spotters that actually gave all the dialogue for all the races, and we put them in, and Beau helped us get the right level, the right placement, and every once in a while you'll hear a little word that peaks that makes sense, like look to your left, or you're like behind you, or 5 feet, 50 feet, and it was very cool.
I thought that was a really fun bonding moment with the crew. I mean, like Kami and I were saying, like we can just babble about car racing all day long because we love it. But not everybody wants to talk about car racing all day long. Well, now we're on a race car movie, and you have to talk about car racing all day long. So there was heaven. And I was really, really proud of the whole crew, because everybody started coming forth asking really great questions. Because, when you're on these big high concept movies, and, we've as a family, we've done a lot of them, we all did Secretariat together. We became horse racing professionals. Mm-hmm. We all did the Muppets together. So we became Muppet aficionados. I mean, you can't help it. You're spending so much time on these movies. So now Gran Turismo is here. And, because we wanted to start with at least a base coat of realism, and then as much as we can kick it up a notch, sometimes kick it up 20 notches, but that base coat of realism had to be there. So like Erin said early on, I just gave this recording. Literally, I did a 25-hour car race, and I just put a little recorder up against a walkie-talkie so you could hear our team radio. I just thought it'd be cool for my dumb YouTube videos. And so I just took that recording, I kind of consolidated it, gave it to Colby, and we played it for the director, and the director was like, "That's disgustingly awesome. I want to hear that everywhere." And so I said, "Oh, great. Well, we should talk about the rules of like, what do you hear and when, dialogue-wise, just dialogue-wise." And so I was like, when you're point of view of the driver, you hear just your crew chief, and then you hear these spotters who are people watching your car and telling you he's 2 car lengths back, he's on the inside, he's on the right, whatever. And, but then also as per the rules, drivers don't talk to each other. You know, you do that in Top Gun. All the pilots talk to each other, but this is Gran Turismo and it's real. So as a rule, you know, driver hears crew chief and spotter. So he's like, disgustingly awesome. I want to hear that constantly. And I was like, okay, cool. And then when you're in the crowd, they have PA speakers everywhere. And you've got these guys that are calling the race like radio DJs. You know, they're basically the TV broadcasters. So Erin found guys that are Will Buxton and what was the other guy?
It was Beck Williams.
Yeah.
You had Will Buxton. You had Mike Chen was actually to go off of this. Mike Chen was found by our loop group leader. They did a lot of research. I gave them these YouTube videos because that's what they were putting into these races were a bunch of YouTube videos, which had all these professional announcers. She had to go through all those YouTubes and find a connect, and she found this gentleman named Mike Chen, who's he's got great YouTube videos and such a great voice.
And it's very fan serving because if you are somebody that watches these races, these are the familiar voices that you hear.
Doing the play-by-play and the color and all that.
So as per our set of rules, you know, when you're with the audience out in the crowd, you'd hear these over PA speakers, you know, constantly going. And Neill, of course, disgustingly awesome. I want to hear that constantly.
You're making Neill sound like a Muppet.
He was loving it though. He was having fun. And you know, then now you're in the pits, and you know, our crew chief would hear the driver. He'd also hear the spotters. He'd also hear race control. So he'd hear like more tech talk of like, you know, car 53 has a stop and go penalty for speed. You know, you'd hear all that stuff, and you'd hear the PA. So of course, what did Neill say?
Disgustingly awesome.
Yeah, of course he did. And so now we're like, oh no, we've got a lot on our hands here, and this is just the dialogue. Like, we haven't even put the race car sounds in
He
yet.
literally was using it to tell stories.
Yes.
Yes.
You know what I mean? To move the story forward without having to do exposition. It's like, hey, the Ferrari's engine just blew, and rather than like having some, hey, the Ferrari engine just blew, you know? It's like part of you watching a race, and it's familiar voices that call the play-by-play and are moving the story forward. And it was awesome to do, but it's a mixed bag that we just drop on Kevin O'Connell.
But before you go on further about this, what was great about these guys, because they're professional, there was no script for them. So they would come in, they would watch the race, and by the way, all these announcers were in one room together, which some of them had never even met in person. Wow. Two would go into the booth, and they watch the race, and then we would open the mic, and they would just announce the entire race. And they hit every story point that Neill loved, and it was just natural. It sounded natural.
Like we had the French guy
that
French
called
guy
in
French, and you're like, oh my God, that's exactly how it would sound.
Because the thing is, when you're on the tracks, it's usually whoever speaks that language where you're at. So we had the Dubai guy, we had a French guy, we had a German guy, and then when we were on the TV side of it, it was usually a UK guy. So that's where you had the different announcers going on each race.
And those guys are like the French guy and the Dubai guy, and
they're real race.
They are real announcers in
Yes.
those territories, and everybody there in those territories knows their voices because they're the guy.
Beck Williams flew in from Canada or something like that. She flew in to do this and then had to fly out and go to a Canadian race. And then I remember Mike Chen saying, well, we have to have a special mic, which was the Coles 4104. And we were like, oh, didn't even know. And so we ordered that mic. And so everything was very just true to how they announced, which was great.
Beau, earlier you said that you pitched the idea to the director about having everything kind of from the driver's point of view. There's a really cool thing that happens in the movie, at least twice, maybe more. We see the driver's face, the main character's face, and then the plot mechanism is that he's got to focus more. And the sound changes to represent his focus.
Our job is to watch the movie and present everything, like as hey, all of that sound needs to live. So conceptually wise, that stuff sometimes doesn't come early. We just cover everything, and then someone like Colby comes in and
has an idea.
Yeah,
no, that was a couple of moments where he really wanted to carve out, and he, from working with him before, he really likes these in your head moments. And the really cool thing about having layers and layers and layers, because there's Charles Deenan's whole team came up with not just the cars, but then some layers of risers and tones and whooshes and rumbles and all kinds of things. And then, our sound editors, Matt Cavanaugh and Sam Fan, they contributed more and more and more layers of, designier, sweetener type things and real visceral things like those tires just hitting those curbs and the tires just breaking traction just a little bit, or the wind whistling around and everything like that. So we have everything to choose from. And if you literally just take all the engines and turn them off, the story can still kind of be told through whooshes and rumbles and winds and designy things and everything. It would just sound more like a sci-fi movie at that point. But what was really cool is in those point of view moments, if we started by just muting the engines and then just seeing what we're left with, it was kind of the case of, removing sounds is more effective than adding sounds. And just for the sound nerds, I just took everything that I had left over, which was kind of the sound of the tire running over the rumble strip. I took that and drove it into a slapper, and then just played only the output of slapper and not the source sound, and then panned it, and then just panned it all through the Atmos speakers in the room. So it kind of did this like whip around you kind of moment, and then we leaned on his ADR breaths really big for just a moment. And the moment you're talking about is probably a second and 3/4. It's not a long moment, but it's a nice shift in emotion, and it goes back to a thing that that they talk about in the original script, but it's this like kind of flow state thing. One of my driving coaches from years ago told me to read a book called Zen Golf. And I don't play golf. I don't really like golf. I certainly don't watch golf. But he said, just read the book, but replace the word golf ball with race car. And it all applies. And it's all about just getting into this flow state where you're not quite in the present, you're almost living slightly in the future, you're thinking more about where you want to be and not where you are right now, and all this like oogly boogly stuff that totally works if you want to learn how to drive a race car.
I think we should change and start talking about that.
Yeah.
This podcast. Zen.
So that's kind of Jan's flow state. That's Jan's little moment where it's all very overwhelming, it's all very visceral, it's all around him, but he's just got to check himself, take a breath, take a moment, reset, and get into it.
It's really effective. If you have a 10-minute race car scene and you have the engine pinned for 10 minutes, people will start tuning out. It's too much. Yeah. So finding those moments where you can pull things out and give, even, as you say, for a second and a half, the ears a little rest.
Colby and Austin were really good about cutting away for us, so we could find those holes.
One of the things that the film crew really afforded us was they would step out and say, you guys mix the reel and how you think it should be, and then they would come in and the editors would get their notes in, and then Neill would come and do the last, and walk away.
The editors were also really receptive to talking to us about little changes that we can make to kind of keep it feel a little more accurate and real. And, it was like, Charles Deanan and his crew would contact me while they were editing, and they're freaking out going, you see the car slow down to make a corner, but then, you cut to him and he's hitting the gas pedal. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So talked to the picture editors, and they were like, yeah, like we just need to cut to something cool to break up the cut. Like, you tell us, we've got him hitting the brake pedal, well, tell us where. And they were awesome. That usually doesn't happen on movies. Usually you don't get to throw it back to the picture department and dictate picture changes. But on this one, it was just all about what makes it cool, what makes it exciting, what drives the story, and what makes it make sense. So they were totally fine with it, to the point where I remember there was one moment where I called them and I said, you hear this line from David Harbour saying, you want to pit next lap, and then you cut to the dashboard and there's a big P on it. And I said, you've got to change that. And he goes, why? I said, that means park. That means the car's in park. They shot that while the car was in park. He goes, I thought it meant pits. And I said, no. But that was fine. It was like, oh, okay, great. We'll paint it out. We'll change it. No problem. That's what was fun.
And what I was getting at is, as far as like giving us the time, we'd go through, mix the thing, and we'd have like ideas of like, oh man, we're just listening to the cars just upshifting constantly. And, maybe what we'll do is have them downshift here and change the tone. And one of the great things about working with Kevin O'Connell is that, he's mixed 4,000 movies, and he knows exactly what a movie should sound like. It just comes naturally to him. So as we're sitting there, he would just blurt out like, hey, we should really hit this moment, and let's back off here. Let the music do this, or let's have the cars be up front, and just knows the balance of like this ebb and flow of how a movie should sound. And he's amazing at it. And it just, like I said, comes totally naturally to him. Beau, hey, racing-wise, it'd be really exciting if this happened, and they would, the film crew would come in, or the guys would come in, and we'd say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And totally receptive. They were just like, oh, yeah, we can work that out. And usually it costs money for visual effects and whatnot, but what do we care? We're sound people. And it was a very collaborative thing with visual effects and all that, because all of this stuff has to work together. A lot of this visual stuff really come together during the final mix. Like the crashes and stuff, we were putting sound in. They were like, just put the sound in and we'll visualize it to that. And it's kind of weird to think that way, you know? Neill will come and goes, there's this thing I just told them to put the engines like flipping down the road during that crash. I have them spilling oil all over the track and there's water going everywhere. We're like, oh, okay, cool. And we put it in, and then the visuals will come in, and all of that stuff is there, and it syncs and it works.
Wow.
You know, there's little bits of moving things with visual effects and we had to deal with, but most of the time it was like, this is what I'm visually doing, letting you guys know, because all we're looking at is just cartoons of cars.
Yeah, there was a moment in particular that I always felt really bad for our sound editors, Sam Fenn and Matt Cavanaugh, because there's a moment where they do this really neat visual effect where the car almost explodes into individual parts, and then you return to Jan's bedroom, and then the car reforms around him. That changed constantly. And it's a true testament to, like, it would have been a great Dolby Atmos demo, because for those that know what the RMU looks like, I mean, the balls are just flying around everywhere. I mean, everything was so precisely panned around and edited, and they would come up with a little high frequency sound for that thing because there's a low frequency thing happening at the same time, and they're constantly moving around. And then the visual effects people would like change the speed of it by 2%, and it would just break the whole thing. It's such a complicated visually looking thing that everybody's eye is kind of drawn to something different. Because I'm sitting more on the right side of the room, my eye would go to like center to right, and then other people would go, well, where's the sound for that? Where's the sound for that? And I realized, well, they're just naturally looking at the left side of the screen, and it was so complicated. And then we'd get it all dialed in, and then you just hear this really loud swear word come from the right side of the room, and I'd look, and then either Sam or Matt would have the new visual effect up on their screen, and they'd be like, oh, they changed it again.
Why would they change it? It was perfect.
Yeah. But Beau did a great job with that scene, I gotta say. He mixed it really well.
Really cool.
Something else that is interesting for this film, there's a lot of shots of our main character driving with a helmet on, and you can not see a ton of emotion on his face just because it's covered by the safety equipment. So a lot of the emotional weight falls then to what's being told to him over the comms. And those comms have to be futzed, but they also have to tell the story, and they also have to cut through a million sounds going on. How did you arrive at the comms?
The comms on one point would be the ADR side of things, which was not a big fan of Neill. Neill wanted to use everything from production. Nothing, he did not believe you go and you can recreate what was already created in front of him in the first place. It was a challenge to get him to get on board to re-loop some of these futs, because we already had all that noise behind it, and to futz it and try to raise it and get around all their effects was a challenge. So it was baby steps with Neill. Do a little,
and also the accents.
Well, the accents was another thing, yeah. But that was, you couldn't come to Neill and say, hey, you need to loop half your movie. He would have been like, you're fired. So you have to go. They have some lines that they want to add because we're in the race and you don't see their mouth. So they would change a couple of the lines. Well, the lines that they were changing or adding different dialogue really would make a difference. And it was a trust level. So the way Kevin would mix it in, how we recorded it, how we put it in, because we would take half of the production line and take the part that would have the car engine on it or from production and put the new ADR in, and Kevin would mix that, and all of a sudden it sounded like the production line. And Neill was like, oh, that's not too bad. And then we would say, do you mind if we do these lines? Okay. But he would come to the ADR sessions. It was just me and the picture editors. That's it. So this was my first time doing ADR without a director involved, which is a little nerve-wracking, when you bring some of these big A-list stars in, to ask them to loop without a director and listen to me.
And change it.
And ask them to change their performance a little bit. They were all very respectful. And by the end of the movie, because the studio had come in and said, the accents are a little thick, do you mind if we loop and bring down the accent a little bit? Neill said, I trust Erin, we'll go ahead and do that. So we ended up re-looping the whole beginning of the movie.
And it was, I kid you not, it was a non-starter. It was like the moment you would go, hey, we should loop this guy's line. Nope.
He would ask for the cue sheets. He would ask to see what was on the cue sheets. And of course I'd show him it was just what he had asked for. And of course, I wanted to sneak some lines on there, but I knew I couldn't do that. And I had some people behind me telling me, hey, just put a couple on there, Erin. And I was, no, it's okay. Let's just trust me. We'll get the lines. We have a long time to go with them. Let's just baby step him into this. And that's what we did. And I got to tell you, I think he might be more of a fan for ADR. I still think he'll resist, but I think he'll be more open to it.
In storytelling and clarity and stuff.
And he could tell the clarity. He was like, wow, I can really understand a lot of these lines now. And in Jan, I understand where he's at. And it was just a really great experience for all of us to see a director so against it and see how far he came.
That bedroom scene where he's talking to his buddy,
Persol, that was all redone.
And what's funny is for months, we're like, I don't know what he's saying.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
No.
Hey, Neill, do you know what he's saying? Nope. But
He
I love
loved
it.
it.
I
He
love
loved
this.
it.
I love this.
And then when we got the note that it was no one could understand it, that's when we were able to open up and say, Neill, are you down with maybe bringing this back to where an audience can understand him? And he said, just try it, see what happens. And he ended up really liking it a lot. Yeah.
That's quite a feather in your cap to change the tide like that. Congratulations. Yeah. In the show, the film, instead of cutaways to like other cars, a lot of times the cutaways are to inside the engine.
Yes.
And it's not for very long, but like I can just imagine when those arrived, you guys being super excited because those are cool shots that you haven't really seen before, so you can make them sound kind of whatever you want to. Do you want to talk about your favorite way of tackling those?
Me and Beau had a lot of fun with that stuff. You know, Dean and his crew had a great time. You know, Neill's a commercial director too, so there's a lot of visual things that he's into. And you know, first time seeing the movie, you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. We get to play whatever we want. These are sound design moments. So some of it came with ideas of like what they wanted it to sound like. You know, the engines and all that. We just made it more detailed for it to work within, you know, a theatrical sense and all that. Both of us like know what cars sound like and what weird things happen in cars. And, you know, in all the recordings that Charles and those guys had gotten, there's all these like little moments that, you know, the little nuggets of sound. Pop-off valve is my thing, and it goes boop, 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 you know. You know, we put that in because the sound works for like slowing down. So when he slams on the brake, that's not the sound that comes from the brake rotor and all that. But we put this boop, 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 because it works tonally. It works in that spot. And Deanan hates it. He literally, after the screening into the movie, we finished, he goes, "Why'd you put that stupid sound on the brake? It doesn't even belong there." It was like, yeah, but tonally, it just fucking worked. We love like that, how that sounds.
Yeah, my race car friends at the track just like, tell Neill, like, you know, they finally made a race car movie for racers. You know, the racing community really likes the movie, you know, but they can't help themselves. And they go, but why did I hear a turbo wastegate on that car? That car doesn't have turbo. Because it's cool. It's cool. It's fine.
Let it go. Yeah, we get those little breaks.
Yeah.
It's funny, we sort of a half premiere because they didn't have a premiere for this thing. They did a screening where they invited the crew and the guy, the real Jan
Marnborough.
One of the producers, Doug Belgrad, introduces me to this English guy, and he's actually a driver for Ferrari. And he goes, what did you do? And I go, I did the sound for the movie. And he goes, oh my God, I have to tell you, I've been like asking everybody, like, who was the sound people? Because this is the first time as a race car driver, I'm watching a movie going, this sounds exactly like how I envision it to sound in my head. And kudos to you guys. And then he went off on the pop-up valve.
Yeah. That's our Easter egg for the real car people to pick up.
That's not what it sounds like. So, yeah, that was awesome.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. It's a super fun film for sound. I can't imagine the fun you had. Well, I understand it was a lot of work too. I'm not trying to make it sound like you
it was more fun.
Non-stop fun, but it would have been an amazing challenge, and you rose to it and really exceeded. It was an amazing film to hear for sure. I want to throw a big thanks to the fine folks at 424 for hosting this talk, and Linda Rosner for helping set it up. Gran Turismo, based on a true story, is now available on digital and will be available on 4K and DVD November 7th. Once again, thanks to Erin, Kami, and Beau for sharing their knowledge and experiences. My name's Tim Muirhead. We'll talk to you again soon on Tonebenders Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
It was a pleasure.
Tonebenders is produced by Timothy Muirhead, Renee Coronado, and Teresa Morrow. Theme music is by Mark Strait. Send your emails to info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter via @thetonebenders and join Tonebenders Podcast on Facebook. Support this podcast. You can use our links when you shop with Amazon or B&H, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click the support button. Thanks for listening.
Are you looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? Tonebenders is part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org.